Dabo said some things again this week at his coach's show. You know, they're playing Saturday. I don't know if you're aware, but they are in the ACC championship game. And so, Dabo taking some calls at his coach's show. And there was a guy, and I only read the transcript. Truthfully, I did not listen to the exchange. I don't think I need to. We've got the full context coming up in a second. But I told you the other day, before I knew this coach's show exchange was going to happen, I told you, I think a couple of things are true here. The first is, I think Dabo knows he's got to make some changes. The second thing is, he's not about to share that with you and give you the satisfaction of knowing that he sees weaknesses in his program, because if he gives you that satisfaction, it really just burns a hole in him. And I told you, I don't care. I don't mind that because I would feel the same way. Having said that, someone calls into Dabo's show, and I'm going to run through it for you real quick before I give you the quote, but they're kind of, jawing back and forth with him in a jovial way. And they're saying, I remember back in the day where you were early in your tenure here and, we got to a game and we lost the game, or maybe they won the game. But anyway, it was a turning point. It was time to make decisions. And Dabo's kind of saying, yep, sure was. Yep, sure was. So the fan says, well, a lot of the fan base is at a point where we think it's time for you to make more critical decisions. Now, we pause there, and I think that there's a large chunk of our audience that saw what I'm about to show you today. Quote edits are a great thing, and quote edits are a terrible thing. If you have ever perused social media, you know what I'm talking about. Quote edits are a picture, and then there's a quote on it. Could be true, could be fake, it doesn't matter. If it's written and it's on the internet, people believe it. Well, there is a third thing that happens. Sometimes part of a quote is put on a quote edit that's kind of meant to be taken out of context because it's meant to stir you up. In a former world, we would have called that clickbait. I don't know what clicks are worth on Twitter, but in a former world, that's what we would call that. It is misleading at best. So I had Director Colin, I had the PAs, I had them produce two versions of a quote. One is the version that you probably saw floating around the ether today. The other is the entire quote. Here's probably what you saw. This is Dabo Swinney. What would you do if you only saw this quote? Quote, all I can tell you is I'm going to do my job, and if it comes time where people don't like how I do my job, then they can hire somebody else. That was floating around everywhere today. What do you think? You don't know the context. You have no clue what the setting was. You just know he said, if people don't like how I do my job, they can hire somebody else. Well, if you don't like Dabo Swinney, it's just more ammunition in a very, very heavy belt around your waist that you can use against him. You don't like him. You think he's arrogant. You think he's pompous. He whines too much. How much money is he making now? He deserves that criticism. Okay. Well, I, decided to take the contrarian stance of finding the whole quote. It's something they used to teach us in school. And I found it. It was out there, believe it or not. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to read you the whole quote. It's going to start with what you just heard because that's the beginning of the quote. But it doesn't end there. And I want you to listen to the whole thing. Quote, all I can do is tell you, if I'm going to do my job, if it comes a time where people don't like how I do my job, they can hire somebody else, and now we continue. If I did that, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you tonight. The reality is we're a 10-2 football team playing for our league title and one of the most consistent teams in the country. Every year is different. Nobody's got their head in the sand. We got to get better in a lot of areas. We know that. But if we want to fire the head coach and fire the staff every year if we don't make the playoff, then you're going to have a new head coach here very often. And you're going to have a new staff here every year because that ain't going to happen a lot. There's only 4 teams. And if that's the mindset of Clemson, there will be a new head coach here and there will be a new staff every year. And will be a very mediocre, inconsistent program. That's how I look at it. If I read that and I heard him say it, I would probably not even realize there was going to be controversy around it. But if you take it out of context, it's pretty easy. Dabo's a very fiery guy. He's very emotional. He is always brutally honest with you, which I've told you I much prefer to the alternative, which is someone who never gives you anything and has the personality of a rock. And so I've never had an issue. Even when the guy says something I disagree with, I appreciate his candor and his honesty. He is secure enough professionally where he can afford to do that now. What he said's true. Okay, what he said is something I've heard Nick Saban have to do a lot. And that is, once you enjoy a certain amount of success, people recalibrate their expectations. And the expectations become totally unrealistic. The expectations become winning 10 games means there's a problem. And all guys like him try and do is remind you. And trust me, they could be a lot more arrogant than they are about it. He could just say, do you realize what you were before you had me? I'll say it. You know what? I will be the proxy for Dabo Swinney. Do you guys realize what you were before you had him? Do you realize you've enjoyed more success just during his tenure than stacking the entire modern era history of your program on top of itself before him? That's true. That's just true. And so you're thankful for it, and I don't argue that any Clemson fan's ungrateful for it. I do think there may be a portion, I don't know how big it is, but a portion of the fan base up there, no different than the Bama folks, no different than Georgia folks will be eventually, mark my words, no different than Ohio State fans have been and would be again under Ryan Day if he enjoys a string of successful years like Dabo has, like Saban has. You just lose grip with reality. You just lose perspective, and you sometimes start to let casuals and outsiders and some casual insiders convince you that there are major problems. There are major problems at Clemson only if your standard is winning a title every year. And their standard's extremely high. And I've been mildly critical of some of their approaches. You know, I thought, for example, I was surprised, let me put it that way, I was surprised that he didn't go outside for coordinator hires. His preference was to go inside. I don't think they have an experienced enough coaching staff right now. You know, without singling out any one issue, any one problem, because I'm not qualified to do that. I just think when you compare their staff to other staffs, and you could have your pick of pretty much anyone out there, and you've got a pretty hefty salary pool with which to go attract quality candidates, he chose to value internal and promoting from within. He chose to do that. I disagreed with it. It is what it is. But when he starts getting a little defensive there, that's just him. When he starts saying, yeah, if you don't like it, fire me, get somebody else. It wasn't the whole quote, but even if that was the whole quote, that's him. Now, here's what I think, to reiterate, is the reality there. The reality there is they quality control everything, guys. All these major programs do. So they know 50 times more about the inner workings of their program than any of us ever will. And Dabo Swinney is not stupid. So Dabo Swinney has long since gotten with not only his coaching staff, but also his off-field personnel and his quality control folks, recruiting, nutrition, strength and conditioning, everything in between. And especially after the season's over, they will self-scout, they'll self-evaluate, they'll do a healthy self-inventory, and there'll be a laundry list of things they want to change. But what he's not going to do, because it's not in him to do it, is stand there and let you bang on him. He's too prideful a guy. Could it be a flaw sometimes? Yeah, I guess it could. The reason I don't criticize it is because I would be just like him. I am not about to give you the satisfaction, because deep down, and I'm just being real with you again, I don't respect your football acumen. If you sit in front of me with a keyboard at a press conference, I don't think you know about the game what I know about the game. I never walked into your place of business and criticized your sentence structure, so I don't really respect you and your criticisms of me. You're free to do it, I just don't respect it. And so what I'm not going to do is allow myself to stand there and take it from you. And I'm not going to say, well, you're right, well, you're right, well, you're right. That's just not the way it's going to work. It wouldn't work that way with me at Pate State. It doesn't work that way with him at Clemson. But that doesn't mean you may not be right. That doesn't mean he may not see it the same way you do. That doesn't mean some of the changes that you and I and many other people think he needs to make, he doesn't agree with and may not be well on his way to trying to make. He's just not going to give you the satisfaction of publicly admitting it. And if you got a problem with that, I guess you got a problem with the head coach at Clemson. I don't have a problem with it, so I don't have a problem with the head coach at Clemson. Thanks for watching, guys. Don't leave yet. Don't leave yet. Make sure you like the video and please subscribe to the channel. Not just for me, that's how we keep this entire thing free.